The lunar city of Casimir was like the universe's dirtiest secret, a black hole of ambition powered by actual black holes. If ever there was a place where humanity's insanity bled into ingenuity, this was it. The city clung to the dusty gray of the moon's surface, a testament to mankind's refusal to stay put on Earth, like a teenager sneaking out of the house but forgetting his jacket. Doctor. Roderick Tarsus, the unkempt genius of virology, stood in his lab, staring at the screen with the kind of fascination reserved for watching a train wreck in slow motion. Next to him, Inara Vex, his protege and eternal achiever of participation awards, was peering at the data with eyes that screamed, "I picked the wrong day to ditch coffee." "So, Rod," Inara drawled, tapping her chewed-up stylus against the desk. "What the hell am I looking at? Did someone sneeze on the Petri dish, or did the universe finally admit it hates us, Doctor?" Tarsus squinted as if trying to see through the universe's BS. "Well, Inara, if I didn't know better, I'd say we found ourselves a little alien virus, and not the chest-burster kind, more like the kind that asks for your DNA number at the bar." "Lovely. Just what we need," Inara muttered. "More cosmic Tinder matches." "What makes this one special? It's dormant for now," Roderick said, his voice as dry as the lunar dust outside. "But something about it likes humans. A lot." Inara rolled her eyes. "Of course it does. We're just so damned attractive as a species. Like those creepy porcelain dolls you can't get rid of because they keep showing up on your shelf." The lab was a cluttered mess of beeping machines, blinking lights, and half-eaten takeout cartons, because when you're unraveling the secrets of the universe, proper nutrition is the first thing to get spaced. The walls were plastered with motivational posters of cats hanging on branches with captions like, "Hang in there," a grim reminder that sometimes the universe's biggest joke is irony. "Doctor," Tarsus scratched his stubbly chin. "We've got to figure out what this virus wants, besides long walks on the DNA strand and candlelit Petri dishes. And pray tell, how do we do that without, killing everyone in Casimir first?" Inara asked, her eyes flicking toward the window where the city sprawled in its gritty glory. "Easy," Roderick said with a sardonic smile. "We poke it with a stick until it tells us its secrets." Inara smirked. "Ah, the scientific method. The gravity in Casimir was just shy of Earth normal, enough to let you bounce around like an idiot if you weren't careful." Outside the lab, the city buzzed with the frenetic energy of people who knew they were living on a celestial dead end, where the only way off was on the next supply shuttle, which was always 2 weeks late. As they pondered the viral enigma, the lab's overhead screens flickered with news from the outer colonies, more reports of disturbances and strange signals. Typical. The galaxy was always up to something. If it wasn't pirates, it was politicians, and if it wasn't politicians, it was plagues. If you could bet on cosmic crapshoots, you'd lose every time. "You think this has anything to do with the black hole energy?" Inara asked, trying to connect dots that didn't want to be connected. "Inara," Roderick replied, "if I had a credit for every time someone blamed a black hole for their problems, I'd own a moon base. But who knows, maybe the universe is getting creative." Suddenly, the lab door hissed open, letting in a gust of stale, recycled air, and a figure wrapped in a too-big-for-his-own-good military jacket. It was Lieutenant Harper, the kind of guy who looked like he still believed in the Easter Bunny, against all evidence to the contrary. "Doc Vex," he greeted them with a nod, carrying an expression that suggested he was just told he had to clean the lunar toilets. "Word around Casimir is that something weird's brewing in here." "Oh, Harper," Inara said with faux sweetness, "you know us. If we're not brewing weird, we're not doing our job." "Yeah, well, Command's got their knickers in a twist," Harper replied, glancing nervously at the equipment. "They want a status update, preferably one that doesn't involve the words 'we're all going to die.'" Roderick chuckled darkly. "Relax, Harper. We're scientists, not pessimists, though sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." Inara added, "Tell Command we're on top of it." Just like a cat on a high shelf contemplating life, as Harper left, his stiff gait like a man marching to his own funeral, Roderick turned back to Inara. "We need a plan. Plan A, chuck it out an airlock," Inara suggested. "Plan B, tell everyone it's a new kind of yogurt and let natural selection do its thing." "Tempting," Roderick said, "but let's see if we can actually learn something before we prematurely end civilization." Inara sighed. "Fine." Ruin my fun. They worked in silence for a while, the kind only broken by the hum of computers and the occasional beep that signaled nothing particularly good or bad, just ambiguous like the universe itself. "You ever think," Inara said eventually, "that maybe we're not meant to solve every mystery? Some things are just meant to be." She paused, then added, "or meant to kill us either way." Roderick shrugged. "It's either that or we admit that the universe is a giant, indifferent jerk." Inara laughed, a sound that echoed off the lab's metal walls. "You ever wonder if all this," she gestured wildly, "is just one cosmic prank?" Roderick smiled. If it is, I'd like to meet whoever's behind it. I owe them a drink. As they continued their work, the virus's secrets remained frustratingly out of reach, like a lottery jackpot destined to taunt them. But they soldiered on, because that's what humans do. We poke the universe until it pokes back, and then we act surprised when it hurts. The lights flickered ominously, a reminder that black hole energy, while powerful, was as stable as a drunk tightrope walker. Inara snorted. You know, this place gives me the creeps sometimes. It's like living in a giant, ticking time bomb. Well, Roderick said, looking up from his terminal, if it makes you feel any better, the bomb's powered by science. Somehow, that does not help, Inara replied dryly. Their banter was interrupted by a loud crash from the corridor. Both turned to see a trolley laden with lab equipment careening past the door, pushed by an unseen force. Think that's a sign we should call it a day? Inara asked, raising an eyebrow. Roderick chuckled. Nah, it's just the moon reminding us who's boss. In the silence that followed, Roderick leaned back, stretching his arms. We need to keep this under wraps for now. Last thing we need is a panic. You mean last thing we need is to be lynched by an angry mob, Inara corrected. Same difference, Roderick replied with a wry grin. As they packed up for the day, the hum of the lab settled into a comfortable background noise. The truths they sought remained elusive, but that was just another day at the office. Inara paused at the door, glancing back at the lab. You ever think we'll find all the answers? Roderick shrugged. Probably not, but it's the questions that keep us going. With that, they left the lab behind, heading out into the artificial night of Casimir, a city that never slept because it was too busy trying not to implode. The lunar surface stretched out beneath them, a barren, beautiful reminder of humanity's stubborn streak. As they wandered the corridors, Roderick mused aloud. You know, one day all this could be a footnote in some history book. Inara laughed. Or a cautionary tale. As they reached the end of the corridor, the door to the outside world hissed open, revealing the vast starry void. Roderick paused, looking up at the stars. You know, the universe might be indifferent, but it's never boring. Inara nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Here's to hoping it stays that way. And with that, they stepped out into the lunar night, the secrets of the universe awaiting them, and a mysterious virus that might just be the punchline to a joke they hadn't figured out yet. The next morning, Inara found herself back in the lab, rubbing her temples as if trying to massage out the memory of last night's lunar moonshine. Roderick, meanwhile, was already at the console, tapping away like a man with nothing better to do. Morning, sunshine, Inara greeted, her voice dripping with sarcasm like a leaky faucet. I see someone hasn't discovered the wonders of sleep. Sleep is for the dead, Roderick quipped, eyes glued to the screen. Or for those with nothing better to do than dream about space ponies. Space ponies, Inara raised an eyebrow. You've really lost it this time, Doc. Probably, he admitted with a grin. But at least I'm consistent. As they reviewed the previous day's data, an alarm shrieked through the lab, an ear-splitting robotic wail that could wake the dead, or worse, an accountant. What now? Inara groaned, slapping the console's mute button. Please tell me that's just the coffee machine revolting. Roderick frowned at the screen, his expression shifting from bemused to concerned faster than you could say intergalactic pandemic. Seems like our little virus decided to wake up earlier than expected. Inara leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the data. You mean it's active? As a teenager during finals week, Roderick confirmed, scratching his head. Except this virus isn't sweating over exams, it's more interested in human hosts. Terrific, Inara sighed. We should have known it wouldn't stay dormant. Nothing does in this hellhole. I bet even the dust bunnies are plotting something. Their banter was interrupted by an urgent message flickering across the monitor. Priority alert, containment breach at Black Hole Energy Facility. Roderick's eyes widened. Well, that's not ominous at all. Inara grabbed her jacket, the kind of stylish piece that said, I might care about fashion, but only when I'm not dealing with viral outbreaks. Guess we better go see what kind of cosmic blender we've been tossed into. As they hurried through the corridors of Casimir, the city buzzed with the frantic energy of a place that knew how close it was to disaster. People darted in every direction, like ants who've just realized someone stole their sugar. The Black Hole Energy Facility loomed ahead, a hulking behemoth of steel and reinforced glass, pulsing with the raw power that only a cosmic anomaly could provide. Inside, the chaos was palpable. Workers in hazmat suits scurried about, their collective panic mingling with the sterile, recycled air. Good to see the facilities taking this seriously, Inara said, her voice heavy with irony. A harried technician, face obscured by the suit's visor, waved them over. Dr. Tarsus, Inara, a bunch of workers have suddenly come down with something nasty. It's spreading faster than free drinks at a company party. Symptoms? Roderick asked, switching to business mode in an instant. Even in crisis, he could function like a professional, at least when it suited him. Fever, delirium, some kind of neurological effect, the technician rattled off, words racing one another. And get this, the virus seems to be mutating. Inara echoed, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. I thought we were dealing with a sleepy little bugger. Apparently it got itself a shot of espresso, Roderick muttered. Let's see the patients. They were led to a makeshift quarantine zone where several workers lay restrained to their beds, moaning like extras in a bad horror film. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural luminescence, a kind of eerie green that hinted at intelligence or insanity. Why do they always get the creepy eyes? Inara whispered, as if afraid of waking the sleeping monsters. Because nature's got a flair for drama, Roderick replied, examining one of the patients. Looks like the virus is more than we bargained for. It's adapting, learning from its hosts. Great, Inara said, folding her arms. So we've got a virus with the brains of a supercomputer and the attitude of a teenager. Roderick poked one of the patient's arms with a pen, eliciting a groan. We need to contain this. Fast, the technician nodded, already sweating under his suit. We've sealed the facility, but how do we stop it from spreading further? Roderick thought for a moment, massaging his temples. We need to isolate the source, figure out how it's transmitting and cut off its food supply. Inara cocked her head. You mean us, essentially, Roderick admitted. So time to figure out what this thing really wants before we're all glowing like cheap nightlights. As they worked, Inara couldn't help but glance back at the afflicted workers. You think they knew what they were signing up for when they came to this lunar outpost? Roderick chuckled darkly. Doubt it. But if they did, they must have really needed the dental plan. Time ticked away mercilessly, each second a reminder that they were in a race against something that didn't tire, didn't sleep, and definitely didn't care. They scoured the facility, analyzing samples, running tests, and trying to predict what their adversary would do next as if it were a mischievous child with a penchant for breaking toys. Eventually, Inara dropped into a chair, exhausted. This is getting us nowhere. It's like trying to punch a cloud. Roderick paced, thinking aloud. There's got to be a pattern, a reason why it activated now. Could be the black hole energy, Inara suggested, gesturing vaguely at the ominous power source in the corner. Maybe it feeds on it, or maybe, Roderick countered, it just likes the ambience. Their musings were cut short by an alert. Another worker had succumbed to the virus, bringing the count of infected to a solid dozen, an unlucky number in any culture. Looks like it's spreading faster than we can contain it, Inara noted grimly. Roderick nodded. We need more data. Something to give us leverage against this thing. Inara perked up, an idea forming. We could try to communicate with it. Maybe it's got something to say. Talk to a virus? Roderick arched an eyebrow. What do you propose we do? Ask it out for coffee, Inara shrugged. Why not? We've tried crazier things. Maybe it'll tell us what it wants if we ask nicely. All right, Roderick said, rubbing his hands together. Let's see if we can get its attention, but if it asks for a gift basket, I'm out. Setting up their equipment in front of one of the infected workers, they tapped into the facility's comm system, hoping to establish some kind of connection with the virus. It was a long shot, but long shots were all they had left. All right, Inara said, speaking into the mic. Hey, creepy glowy virus thing. We come in peace, Roderick shook his head, shooting her a look. Seriously, that's your opening line. Got a better one, she shot back. The air hung thick with anticipation, charged with a sense of impending doom, but nothing happened. No dramatic reveal, no sudden enlightenment. Just silence and the low hum of the facility in the background. Well, that was anticlimactic, Inara remarked, deflating a little. Roderick turned back to their console. Maybe it's not ready to talk just yet. We'll try again later. As they pored over the data, Roderick suddenly sat up straighter, peering at the screen with renewed interest. I think I found something. What? Inara asked, leaning in eagerly. The virus is emitting a low-frequency signal, Roderick explained, pointing at a series of numbers on the monitor. It's like it's trying to reach out, Inara frowned. Trying to call home, or calling for reinforcements, Roderick said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Either way, we need to trace this signal. It might lead us to its origin. Think there's still time? Inara asked, hope warring with dread. Roderick met her gaze, determination etched into his features. We've got to try. Unless you want to be part of some interstellar science experiment. Pass, Inara said, shuddering. Let's trace that signal before the universe decides to double down on the cosmic jokes. They worked methodically, tracking the signal through the tangled mess of wires and data streams that comprised Casimir's communication network. It was a laborious process, like finding a needle in a haystack made entirely of other needles. As they finally pinpointed the source, their screens lit up with a map of the lunar surface, marked with a red dot not far from the city. That's our spot, Roderick said, eyes gleaming with excitement. Inara grinned, fueled by the prospect of progress. Think this could be it. The source? Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Roderick cautioned. The universe loves to throw curveballs. Armed with their new lead, they geared up for an expedition, donning the requisite suits that screamed we're professionals while making them look like particularly dorky astronauts. As they prepared to head out, Roderick paused, looking at Inara with a rare moment of sincerity. "You ready for this?" Inara nodded, her smirk returning. "Ready as I'll ever be. Let's go find out if this virus is just another cosmic punchline." With that, they stepped out into the lunar surface, the barren landscape sprawling around them like a silent witness to mankind's stubborn persistence. As they trudged toward the signal source, Inara couldn't help but wonder if they were walking into a trap concocted by the universe's twisted sense of humor. But whatever awaited them, they were determined to face it head-on, armed with nothing but their wits and a profound distrust of anything that glowed in the dark. The lunar dust crunched beneath their boots, a rhythmic reminder that time was of the essence and that they were only human, fragile, and flawed, but determined to make it to the punchline intact. The lunar landscape stretched out before them like a particularly uninteresting postcard. Inara adjusted her helmet, squinting at the coordinates on the map as if staring hard enough might suddenly make all their problems evaporate. Spoiler, it didn't. Nothing like a stroll on the moon to clear your head, Roderick remarked, scanning the horizon. Or fill it with existential dread. Speak for yourself, Inara replied. I signed up for the dental plan, not the apocalypse. They followed the red dot on the map, trudging through powdery lunar dust that had seen far more interesting days. If this virus had a home, they'd find it, even if it meant walking all the way to the moon's backside. No one ever mentioned the ridiculous lengths you'd go to just to avoid glowing like a glow stick at a rave. As they neared the source, a small structure came into view, battered by time and neglect. It was a relic from a past mission, left to rust in the lunar wilderness like a forgotten childhood toy. Who could resist the allure of a creepy abandoned building on a dusty rock? Answer: anyone with a shred of self-preservation. But Inara and Roderick had never been known for their caution. Think it's got a welcome mat? Inara asked, trying to peer through the cracks in her helmet. Only if we're lucky, Roderick replied, pushing open the creaky metal door. Black holes and viral outbreaks, just what we needed for a well-rounded lunar vacation. Inside, the air felt thick, oppressive. They flipped on their helmet lights, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. The place was a mess of outdated tech and empty promises, wires dangling like jungle vines over a graveyard of forgotten machinery. Looks like someone threw a rave without telling us, Inara quipped, stepping over a particularly sad-looking terminal. Roderick studied the room, eyes narrowing at a flickering console that still clung to life. Well, looks like we found the nerve center. Let's see if it still works. As if sensing their presence, the console sparked to life with a sputtering hum, screens lighting up in erratic sequences. The virus's signal pulsed through the system like a heartbeat, loud and relentless. Didn't expect it to actually cooperate, Inara said, pulling up a chair that seemed more rust than metal. Usually abandoned tech just laughs and dies on you. Roderick tapped at the keypad, watching as streams of data filled the displays. The signal's strong here. Whatever's broadcasting, it's doing a damn good job of hiding its intentions. Inara leaned in, examining the data. We need to get this back to the city. If we can use Casimir's terraforming tech, maybe we can crack this thing open like an egg filled with nightmares and bad decisions, Roderick added. But sure, let's give it a shot. Packing up the pertinent data, they retraced their steps, leaving the ghostly structure behind. The walk back was filled with the kind of silence that begged for awkward jokes or philosophical musings. Thankfully, they opted for the former. As they approached the city, Inara noticed something unsettling, a series of lights flickering along the skyline, like a distress signal written in Morse code by a particularly enthusiastic intern. Roderick, is it just me, or does Casimir look a bit twitchy?" she asked, gesturing at the erratic lights. Roderick sighed. Fantastic. Looks like the city's having a meltdown. They hurried back to the lab, only to find chaos in full swing. Alarms blared, and the smell of something expensive burning filled the air, never a good sign. A harried technician caught sight of them, waving frantically. Dr. Tarsus Inara, the virus, it's affecting the core systems. Things are going haywire. Of course they are, Roderick muttered, pushing past him to get to the consoles. Let's see what fresh hell we're dealing with now. Inara joined him, eyes flicking across the screens. The virus, it's spreading through the network like it's got a grudge. And look at this, it's causing unusual symptoms in those infected. Roderick leaned closer, reading the reports. Enhanced physical abilities, erratic behavior. Sounds like a Friday night back home. Except this time, it's for real, Inara said, crossing her arms. The infected are developing superhuman strength and unpredictable temperaments. It's like the virus is turning them into rabid werewolves with a vendetta against technology, Roderick added, watching as another system shorted out. We need to isolate these systems. If the core goes down, the whole city could fry. But how? The virus seems to be one step ahead of us, Inara pointed out, frustration tinging her voice. Roderick thought for a moment, then snapped his fingers. The terraforming tech. If we can reroute some of its functions, maybe we can analyze the virus's structure and find a weakness. Sounds like a plan, Inara agreed, already moving to the nearest terminal. Let's make sure it doesn't involve us glowing even more. They worked quickly, fingers flying over keyboards as they bypassed the failing systems. The city's network, built for resilience and redundancy, groaned under the strain of the viral assault. It was like watching a bureaucratic nightmare unfold in real time. Okay, I think we've got it, Roderick said, stepping back with a satisfied nod. We're funneling the data through the terraforming systems now. Let's see what we're dealing with. The screens lit up with a visual representation of the virus, a swirling mass of sinister patterns and shifting designs. It was mesmerizing in the way a deadly storm is beautiful, captivating until it tears everything apart. Wow, Inara breathed, her eyes glued to the display. It's alive, more alive than some people I know, Roderick quipped, studying the patterns intensely. We need to find a way to disrupt its cohesion. If we can destabilize its structure, we might be able to neutralize it. Inara nodded, thoughts racing. Maybe we can use the black hole energy. If it's attracted to it, maybe we can lure it away and disperse it, or it could just make things worse, Roderick warned. But we're fresh out of better ideas. Just then, another alert pinged, drawing their attention back to the city systems. A new wave of infections had just been reported, the symptoms more severe than ever. We're running out of time, Inara said, urgency creeping into her voice. Roderick rubbed his temples. All right, let's do this. We'll need to rig the terraforming network to act like a beacon, using the black hole as a focal point, and hope it doesn't blow us all to kingdom come, Inara finished. They worked with the kind of focus only desperation could provide, tweaking their calculations, adjusting algorithms, and praying to any deity that might be listening to the plight of two stressed-out scientists on the moon. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they had a solution, or at least a semblance of one. Here goes nothing, Roderick said, hands poised over the controls. On my mark, Inara stood beside him, ready for anything or nothing, as the universe often preferred. Let's light this candle. With a final nod, Roderick activated the system, the lab filling with the hum of power as the terraforming network began its work. The monitors displayed the data in real time, showing the virus being drawn toward the black hole's energy signature. Is it working? Inara asked, eyes wide. Roderick watched the patterns shift, the virus's cohesion starting to falter. I think so, it's destabilizing. Just then, the ground trembled beneath their feet, a low rumble that sent a shiver down their spines. A glance out the window confirmed their worst fears. The black hole energy facility was reacting, its systems pushed to the limit. Brace yourself, Roderick warned, gripping the edge of the console as the room shook. The screens flickered, data streams stuttering as the virus fought back, resisting the pull. But the beacon held firm, its influence gradually eroding the virus's structure. It's working, Inara gasped, watching as the virus's influence over the city began to wane. But the victory was short-lived. The energy fluctuations were causing strain across the city, systems groaning under the pressure. Casimir wasn't designed for this kind of stress test. We need to stabilize the facility, Roderick said, urgency clear in his voice. If it collapses, we're all toast, Inara nodded, already moving to the controls. They worked together, racing against time to balance the power flow, diverting energy where it was needed most. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the tremors subsided, the systems gradually returning to normal. We did it, Inara said, disbelief coloring her tone. For now, Roderick replied, still scanning the screens. But we've only bought ourselves time. This thing isn't done with us yet. Inara looked out at the city, the glow of the black hole energy facility casting long shadows across the lunar landscape. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Whatever this virus wanted, it wasn't going to give up without a fight. Well, she said, managing a weary smile. At least we didn't end up as cosmic toast, Roderick chuckled, a hint of relief in his voice. Here's to small victories. Now let's get back to work. We've got a virus to beat. With determination renewed, they turned back to their consoles, ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. After all, sleep was for the dead, or those who dreamed of space ponies, and they had their own nightmares to conquer. The lunar city of Casimir was having a nervous breakdown, and it was taking the entire population with it. The city ran on black holes, a decision as sound as a chocolate teapot, and the viral outbreak was turning the power grid into a tantrum-prone toddler. Systems hiccuped, lights flickered like they were auditioning for a horror film, and the air was thick with the scent of burning circuits, which was never in the brochure. Roderick Tarsus, the unkempt genius who looked like he'd lost a fight with a laundry basket, was elbows deep in data streams, trying to wrench the city back from the brink of chaos. Inara Vex, who could win a gold medal for participation in disasters, stood beside him, alternating between typing furiously and cursing at the console as if it owed her money. The black holes are losing stability, Roderick said, his voice a mix of irritation and grudging admiration for the virus's tenacity. It's like the virus is having a buffet on our energy supply. Great, Inara muttered. We're hosting an all-you-can-eat for our own demise. Just when I thought we'd have a quiet evening, Roderick smirked, eyes glued to the screen. Quiet evenings are for people who don't live on the moon and think space is just for pretty pictures. The lab was a symphony, or rather, a cacophony, of alarms and frantic voices. Technicians scurried around like ants disturbed by a kid with a stick, each one muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. The motivational posters on the walls, spouting lies about teamwork and perseverance, seemed to mock them with their tacky optimism. All right, Roderick snapped. We need to figure out why this virus is so attracted to the black hole energy. If we can't sever this connection, we'll be left holding the ashes of Casimir. Inara glanced at the readouts, her mind a hive of activity. You think it's feeding off the energy? Like some kind of cosmic parasite. Wouldn't be the first time I've seen something thrive by sucking the life out of a host, Roderick replied, not bothering to hide his disdain for the powers that be who probably never had to deal with such cosmic headaches. Inara rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of their predicament like a hangover that wouldn't quit. So what? We just pull the plug on a city powered by black holes. Any more brilliant ideas, or should I start digging our graves? Roderick shot her a look that was half amusement, half exasperation. We can't just shut it down. We'd be swapping one apocalypse for another. We need a plan that doesn't end with us as moon dust. Fine, Inara said, rolling her eyes. But if we end up floating in space because of some harebrained scheme, I'm haunting you. They focused on the data, searching for patterns, anomalies, anything that could give them a foothold in this uphill battle. The virus was unlike anything they'd ever encountered, intelligent, adaptive, and annoyingly persistent. Look at this, Roderick said, pointing to a series of graphs that looked like they were drawn by a drunken spider. The energy spikes correlate with increased viral activity. It's like a feedback loop, so it really is feeding off the black holes, Inara concluded, feeling a mix of awe and dread. Who knew viral pathogens came with a taste for cosmic snacks? Nothing surprises me anymore, Roderick said with a weary shrug. Except maybe the fact that we're not dead yet. A new alert blared across the lab, loud enough to make a banshee cover its ears. The black hole energy facility was nearing critical instability, a situation best described as really bad in capital letters. We'll have to stabilize the facility before it turns into a crater, Roderick said, already formulating a plan that was half genius, half madness. And how do you propose we do that? Inara asked, her skepticism as thick as the lunar dust that clung to their boots. Roderick tapped a few keys, pulling up schematics of the city's energy systems. By redirecting non-essential energy loads and isolating the breach, it'll be like patching a leaking ship with duct tape, but it might buy us time. Great, Inara said, nodding as she absorbed the information. So we're on damage control till we figure out how to kick this virus to the curb. Roderick gave her a sideways glance. More like we're dancing on a knife edge and hoping not to slip. They set to work, their hands moving over consoles with the precision of seasoned gamblers playing a high-stakes game. The city's power grid was a tangled mess of inputs and outputs, a labyrinth that only made sense to those who were either brilliant or deeply masochistic. As they rerouted energy, alarms continued to wail, a backdrop of chaos that became almost comforting in its constancy. This was their life now, a perpetual crisis, with solutions that were only temporary. Okay, I think we've got it, Roderick said after what felt like a small eternity. The facility should hold, assuming nothing else decides to explode today. Inara exhaled, the weight on her chest lifting ever so slightly. Well, that's one problem down. Now we just have to stop a virus that's using us for lunch. Piece of cake, Roderick replied dryly. Just another Tuesday on the moon. They both knew there was no time to rest, no time to celebrate small victories. The virus was still out there, lurking in the systems, waiting for another chance to strike. For every step forward they took, it felt like the universe kept shoving them 2 steps back. So, Inara said, leaning back in her chair, any bright ideas on how to deal with a virus that's practically a ghost in the machine? Roderick scratched his chin, a gesture that usually meant he was about to say something that would either save them or get them killed. We need to understand its code, its very essence. If it's feeding off energy, it might have a core vulnerability, a linchpin we can exploit. And how do we find that linchpin? Inara asked. We can barely keep the lights on. Roderick pondered for a moment, eyes glinting with a hint of madness. We lure it out, create a controlled surge, give it something too tempting to resist. Inara raised an eyebrow. And hope it doesn't take the bait and decide to turn Casimir into a cosmic barbecue. Roderick shrugged. Desperate times, desperate measures. If we can isolate a part of its code, maybe we can find a way to dismantle it from within. Inara sighed, knowing better than to argue when Roderick got that look in his eyes. the look of a man standing on the edge of a great discovery or a monumental disaster. "All right," she said, her resolve hardening. "Let's do it. But if we end up as the moon's newest crater, I'm blaming you." They set the plan in motion, each step more precarious than the last. Roderick manipulated the energy systems, creating fluctuations that would draw the virus like moths to a flame. Inara monitored the outputs, ready to react at a moment's notice. The room was tense, the air thick with anticipation and the faint hope that they might just pull this off. "Here it comes," Roderick whispered, his eyes glued to the screen as the virus began to respond, drawn to the energy like a predator to prey. The screens lit up with activity, data flowing like a digital waterfall. The virus surged, its patterns shifting as it latched onto the energy stream. "Now," Roderick said, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he isolated the segment of code they needed. "I've got it, a vulnerability in its matrix." Inara leaned in, studying the data. "It's like a house of cards. We pull the right piece and it all comes tumbling down." "Exactly," Roderick said, a small smile playing on his lips. "We just need to find the right piece." They worked tirelessly, dissecting the virus's code with the care of surgeons and the urgency of demolition experts with a ticking clock. The city around them continued to teeter on the brink, but for the first time there was a glimmer of hope, however faint. "Got it," Roderick said at last, sitting back with a triumphant grin. "A subroutine we can exploit. If we introduce a counter-virus, it should destabilize the whole structure." Inara nodded, already thinking several steps ahead. "And then it's just a matter of cleanup, assuming we don't blow everything up in the process." Details," Roderick replied with a chuckle, "but we need to act fast." The black holes won't hold for long. They prepared the counter-virus, a digital weapon designed to do what they couldn't, turn the virus's own structure against it. It was a gamble, but in their world, gambles were the only currency that mattered. With everything in place, they initiated the sequence, the lab filled with the hum of technology pushed to its limits. The screens showed the counter-virus in action, penetrating the viral structure like a scalpel slicing through flesh. "Come on," Inara whispered, her knuckles white as she clutched the edge of the console. The room was silent, save for the soft beeping of machines and the distant rumble of the city's unstable heartbeat. Then, slowly but surely, the virus's hold began to weaken, its patterns collapsing under the pressure of their attack. "We're doing it," Roderick breathed, eyes wide with disbelief. "It's working." But their celebration was cut short as the ground trembled once more, a violent shudder that threatened to undo everything they'd fought for. "The black holes," Inara said, panic creeping into her voice. "They're destabilizing again." Roderick's face fell, the realization hitting him like a punch to the gut. "Damn it. We're out of time." The city was at a tipping point, balanced precariously between salvation and destruction. One wrong move and it would all fall apart. "What now?" Inara asked, desperation in her eyes. "We can't let it end like this." Roderick took a deep breath, his usual sarcasm replaced by grim determination. "We go back to basics. We stabilize the power and hope our counter-virus finishes the job." They moved with single-minded focus, each action a lifeline thrown into the chaos. The city's systems groaned, a wounded beast fighting to stay alive. As they worked, the counter-virus continued its assault, the virus's structure unraveling with each passing second. But the black holes remained their greatest threat, an unpredictable force that could undo everything. Finally, in a moment that felt both eternal and instantaneous, the tremors subsided. The city's heartbeat steadied, the viral patterns reduced to harmless static. "We did it," Inara said, disbelief giving way to exhaustion. Roderick nodded, his expression one of weary triumph. "For now, but we can't get complacent. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that nothing stays dormant forever." Inara laughed, a sound filled with relief and the promise of more battles to come. "You're telling me, but for now, let's enjoy not being cosmic toast." With the immediate crisis averted, they turned their attention to the cleanup, ready to face whatever new horrors the universe decided to throw their way. After all, this was life on the moon, where anything and everything was possible, and sleep was just a myth for the dead or those lucky enough to dream of space ponies. Roderick Tarsus stared at the flickering console, his face a picture of grim satisfaction and exhaustion. "Well, that's one problem in a graveyard full of them," he muttered, wiping a sheen of sweat from his brow. He glanced at Inara, whose expression was a mix of relief and anxiety, a cocktail that had become all too familiar. Inara blew out a long breath, her eyes scanning the lab like she expected it to combust at any moment. "The black holes are stable for now, but who knows how long that'll last. This whole place is hanging on by a thread, and I'm not talking the sturdy kind." Roderick grunted, a sound halfway between agreement and resignation. "Yeah, more like the kind of thread you'd find in a discount store's bargain bin." He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answers they desperately needed. The lab, once bustling with activity and tinged with the smell of burnt circuitry, now felt eerily quiet. Silence was a rare luxury on the brink of collapse, but it was the loudest thing in the room. Outside, the city of Casimir was beginning to realize just how precarious its situation was. A power outage on a lunar city powered by black holes was more than just inconvenient, it was a death sentence. The infrastructure was reliant on precise energy management, and with the virus gnawing at its core, Casimir was teetering on the brink of chaos. "Hey, Doc," Inara said, breaking the silence. "You think we're the last sane people in this asylum?" Roderick chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Sane's a stretch. But yeah, we're probably the last idiots dumb enough to think we can fix this mess." As if on cue, the lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the room like specters. Inara cursed under her breath. "Right on schedule," she muttered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Can a girl get a break?" The backup generators kicked in, but the power was a flickering ghost of its former self, a warning of imminent collapse. It was only a matter of time before Casimir would be plunged into utter darkness, and when that happened, the real fun would begin. "Time to move," Roderick said, pushing himself up from his chair with a creak that matched his weary joints. "The natives are getting restless, and we don't want to be around when the lunatics take over the asylum." Inara nodded, her expression hardening. She slung her pack over her shoulder, checking the contents with the precision of someone who had learned the hard way that preparation was the difference between life and death. They stepped out of the lab, the corridors of the facility bathed in the sickly glow of emergency lighting. The hum of machinery was absent, replaced by the distant sounds of panic, a symphony of fear and confusion that only grew louder as they made their way through the city. Casimir's streets, usually bustling with activity, were now a wasteland of flickering signs and abandoned vehicles. The occasional figure darted through the shadows, but the usual camaraderie of the city had dissolved into a primal fight for survival. "Looks like the party started without us," Inara said, scanning the deserted marketplace. "I always did hate missing out on a good riot." Roderick grunted in response, his eyes sharp and watchful. "It's a madhouse out here. We need to find somewhere to hole up until things calm down, if they ever do." They made their way through the city, avoiding the main thoroughfares where the chaos was most pronounced. The air was thick with tension, the kind that crackles right before a storm tears everything apart. As they rounded a corner, they almost bumped into a group of survivors, a ragtag bunch of engineers and technicians, their eyes wide with fear and desperation. One of them, a man with a scraggly beard and a laser cutter slung over his shoulder, stepped forward. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking like old plaster. "You with the city or against it?" Inara raised an eyebrow, her sarcasm coming to the forefront. "Is there a third option, like just here for the show?" Roderick stepped in, his demeanor more diplomatic despite the chaos. "We're just trying to survive, same as you. We're not your enemies." The bearded man looked uncertain, glancing at his companions for guidance. It was clear that authority figures weren't winning any popularity contests right now. After a tense moment, he relented. "All right, but if you try anything funny, you'll be on the business end of this," he said, gesturing to the laser cutter with a flourish that was more theatrical than threatening. Roderick nodded, hiding a smirk. "Noted. Now, got any bright ideas on where to hole up?" "The streets are about as safe as a walk on the sun." The group guided them to an abandoned structure, an old research facility long forgotten by the city's administration. Its walls were lined with dust and neglect, but it was shelter, and that was more valuable than gold right now. Inside, the survivors had cobbled together a makeshift haven. Blankets and supplies were scattered across the room, a small generator providing enough power to keep the darkness at bay. "Home sweet home," Inara quipped, dropping her pack onto the floor, though it could use a decorator. Roderick ignored her, his focus shifting to the flickering console they'd salvaged from the lab. It was their last link to the city's systems, a lifeline that might prove crucial in the years to come. As the group settled in, stories began to circulate, whispers of infected individuals turning feral, their aggression fueled by the very virus that had ravaged the city's infrastructure. It was a nightmare come to life, and there was no waking up from it. "We're running out of time," Roderick said, his voice low as he worked on the console. "The virus is evolving, and if we don't find a way to stop it, Casimir won't be the only casualty." Inara stared at him, her expression one of determination and frustration. "We need to figure out what it's really after. If we can cut off its supply, maybe we can starve it out." Roderick nodded, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with the grace of a concert pianist. "That's the plan. But we'll need more than just luck this time." The survivors watched them work, their hopes hanging by a thread as thin as the one holding the city together. It was a fragile alliance, but desperation had a way of bringing people together, even if it was only temporary. Hours passed in a blur of calculations and theories, each second ticking away like a countdown to disaster. Outside, the city continued to unravel, its pulse a chaotic rhythm that threatened to swallow them all. Finally, Roderick let out a triumphant noise, a sound that echoed in the quiet room like a gunshot. "I've got something," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of disbelief and hope. The survivors gathered around, their eyes glued to the screen as Roderick outlined their plan. It was risky, bordering on insane, but sanity had been a distant memory ever since the virus had sunk its teeth into Casimir. "We need to get to the main control hub," Roderick explained, his gaze meeting each of theirs in turn. "If we can access the core systems, we might be able to cut off the virus at its source." Inara arched an eyebrow. "And how exactly do we get there without becoming a snack for the crazes out there?" Roderick grinned, a flash of the mad scientist beneath the weary exterior. "We improvise, and hope the universe owes us a favor." The group set out, their movements cautious and calculated. The city was a labyrinth of danger, each alley and corridor a potential death trap. They stuck to the shadows, avoiding the infected and the panicked citizens who had given in to desperation. Every step was a gamble, but they played their hand with the expertise of those who had nothing left to lose. It was a testament to human resilience, a refusal to bow in the face of overwhelming odds. As they approached the control hub, the air grew thick with tension. The building loomed before them, a fortress of steel and circuitry that held the key to Casimir's survival, or its ultimate doom. "Let's do this," Roderick said, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. The group moved as one, a unit forged in the fires of crisis and necessity. They breached the control hub, slipping inside like shadows, a team of unlikely heroes determined to wrest control from the jaws of chaos. Inside, the hum of machinery was a comforting reminder that not everything had been lost. Roderick and Inara worked quickly, their movements synchronized as they accessed the core systems. Minutes felt like hours, each heartbeat a countdown to catastrophe. But they pushed forward, driven by a stubborn refusal to surrender to the inevitable. At last, Roderick's fingers stilled, the final command inputted with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The console hummed, its screen bathing them in a soft glow that spoke of promised salvation. "It's done," he said, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and elation. "Let's hope this buys us enough time." Inara squeezed his shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie that spoke volumes in the silence. They had done the impossible, and though the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, they had taken the first step towards reclaiming their city. As they made their way back to the makeshift haven, the group carried a renewed sense of hope, a fragile thing, but powerful in its ability to inspire. Roderick and Inara shared a glance, their expressions weary but resolute. They had faced the darkness and emerged, if not victorious, then at least unbroken. And in a world that had gone mad, that was enough. For now, they were safe. But they knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The virus was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. But as long as they had each other, they would face whatever came with the same stubborn determination that had seen them through this far. The city of Casimir wasn't dead yet, and neither were they. The abandoned research facility had all the charm of a budget motel in the middle of a radioactive wasteland, which, ironically, was the best real estate Casimir had to offer right now. Inside, the survivors buzzed with an energy that bordered on manic, everyone clutching at the straws of hope Roderick had spun for them. Inara paced the makeshift haven like a caged predator, her mind working overtime. "All right, here's a thought," she announced, breaking the tense silence. "What if we use the terraforming nanobots? You know, the ones they were going to use to make the moon feel less lunar?" Roderick looked up from the flickering console, rubbing his tired eyes with one hand. "You mean the ones the city council deemed too unpredictable and potentially catastrophic? Those terraforming nanobots." "Exactly. They're just sitting there collecting space dust. We could reprogram them to target the virus instead of the moon's surface." "Turn them from landscape artists into microscopic hitmen," Inara replied, her voice carrying a mix of desperation and devil-may-care enthusiasm. The gathered survivors exchanged glances, caught between awe and skepticism. The idea was crazy, but then crazy was the new normal. Roderick tapped his chin thoughtfully. "You do realize that involves accessing the mainframe, right? The one currently playing host to our own version of the apocalypse. It's like asking to borrow a cup of sugar from a hungry pack of wolves." Inara shrugged nonchalantly. "What's life without a little risk? Besides, it's not like we've got any better options. Unless anyone has a magic wand or a particularly persuasive prayer to whatever deity handles viral outbreaks and tech disasters." A thin, wiry man with a pair of glasses that seemed to be held together by hope and adhesive tape raised his hand. "What about the infected? They're all over the mainframe. We'd never get close without becoming a permanent part of the decor." "Good point, Specs," Roderick said, shooting him a nod. "But here's a thought. What if we use that chaos to our advantage? like slipping past a sleeping guard dog. Inara leaned back against the wall, crossing her arms. Right, because nothing screams stealth mission like stumbling through a zombie-infested city with a bunch of civilians who think covert ops is a new brand of cereal. Roderick smirked, the hint of a plan forming behind his eyes. We'll need a distraction. Something big enough to draw the infected away from the mainframe long enough for us to slip in, do the tech wizardry, and slip out. Sounds like we're planning a heist in a horror movie, Inara muttered, shaking her head. Next thing you know, we'll be talking about splitting the loot. The group fell into a contemplative silence, the weight of their task settling over them like a heavy fog. It was one thing to talk about saving the city from a viral Armageddon. It was another to actually pull it off. Okay, so let's say we manage this little magic trick, Inara said, breaking the silence. How exactly do we reprogram the nanobots without turning them into something even more terrifying? I'd rather not have the moon reclaim us as fertilizer. Roderick stared at the console, the flickering screen casting shadows across his face. We'll need someone who knows their way around a nanobot's operating system, someone who can speak their language and isn't afraid of getting their hands dirty. The wiry man, Specs, adjusted his glasses and coughed awkwardly. I might know a guy. Used to work in nanotech before the whole, world fell apart thing. Bit of a recluse, but if anyone can talk to machines like they're an old lover, it's him. Great, Inara said, clapping her hands together with mock enthusiasm. Let's just add recruiting a mad scientist to our to-do list. This is shaping up to be the kind of day that makes you question why you got out of bed in the first place. We've all got our reasons, Roderick replied, his voice softer. And right now, Ayers is making sure the city doesn't end up as a footnote in the history of oops, we blew it. With that, the decision was made. Plans were drawn, arguments thrown back and forth like well-worn banter in a dysfunctional family dinner. There was no room for doubt here, only actions, reckless or otherwise. Time was against them, as it always seemed to be. Each second was a reminder of the stakes they faced, the thin line they tread between survival and oblivion. The group set out, moving through the city with a kind of quiet resolve that came from knowing there was no going back. Outside Casimir was a war zone, the streets alive with shadows and the echoes of chaos. Inara led the way, her every step careful and deliberate. If we make it through this, I'm demanding a raise, she tossed over her shoulder, her voice dripping with sarcasm. And a vacation, a long one, somewhere nice. Roderick chuckled softly. You and me both. Though I doubt there's enough cash in the universe to make this worth it. As they reached the fringes of the mainframe facility, the tension ratcheted up a notch. The building loomed before them, a dark monolith surrounded by the infected, drawn to it like moths to a flame. All right, Specs, Roderick said, turning to the bespectacled man. Time to see if your friend is still around, or if he's joined the ranks of the brainless. Specs nodded, his expression a strange blend of excitement and fear. If he's not here, then we're screwed, but if he is... Well, let's hope he's still got a few tricks up his sleeve. While Specs ventured off to find his hermit genius, the rest of the group huddled behind the ruins of an old transport station, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. The air was thick with anticipation, every shadow and sound a potential threat. So, what's the plan if this all goes sideways? Inara asked, leaning against a crumbling wall. Roderick shrugged. We run, hide, and hope the universe decides to cut us a break. Inara snorted. Yeah, cause that's been working out great for us so far. Minutes ticked by with the agonizing slowness of a snail on sedatives, each one bringing with it a fresh wave of doubt and apprehension. Then, just as the tension reached its breaking point, Specs returned, a wiry old man in tow. The newcomer had the look of someone who had long since stopped caring about appearances, his hair an unruly tangle of white and his eyes sparkling with the kind of madness usually reserved for prophets and lunatics. This is Dr. Karev, Specs announced, gesturing to the man with a flourish. He's the one who can help us reprogram those nanobots, Doctor. Karev looked them over with a critical eye, his expression suggesting that he wasn't entirely convinced of their competence. So you're the ones trying to keep this rock from imploding, he said, his voice gravelly and sharp. That's us, Roderick replied, his tone light but firm. Think you can help? Karev snorted. Help, I can do more than that. But I'll need access to the mainframe, and I'll need you lot to keep the crazes off my back while I work. Just point us in the right direction, Inara said, her voice a mix of determination and weariness. We'll handle the rest. With a plan as solid as it was likely to get, they moved forward. The mainframe facility loomed ahead, a bastion of technology surrounded by chaos. They were a ragtag bunch, held together by desperation and the faintest whisper of hope. Getting through the infected was a bit like trying to navigate a minefield while blindfolded and slightly drunk. Each step was a gamble, each breath a risk. But somehow, through sheer luck or grim determination, they made it inside. The facility was a labyrinth of corridors and flickering lights, the hum of machinery a constant reminder of the task at hand. Dr. Karev worked quickly, his fingers moving over the controls with a speed that belied his age. "Keep them busy," Karev growled, not bothering to look up from the console. "I need time and I don't have much of it." Roderick and Inara took up positions by the entrance, ready to defend their makeshift fortress against anything that might come their way. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the possibility of violence. Inara shot Roderick a sideways glance, her expression wry. "You know, for a guy who spends most of his time in a lab, you're pretty good at this whole saving the world thing." Roderick chuckled softly, the sound low and rough. "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're desperate and have no other choice." Minutes turned into what felt like hours, each one stretching out in a slow parade of anxiety and anticipation. They could hear the infected outside, their guttural moans a haunting chorus that set their nerves on edge. Then, just as the tension reached its boiling point, Karev let out a triumphant noise. "Got it. The nanobots are ready to deploy," he announced, his voice a mix of pride and exhaustion. "Time to see if we've just made things better or a whole lot worse," Inara said, her voice tinged with a grim sort of humor. Karev initiated the sequence, the console lighting up with a series of beeps and whirs that were strangely reassuring in their mechanical regularity. Outside, the infected stirred, as if sensing the shift in the air. The nanobots deployed with a silent efficiency, their invisible presence spreading through the facility and beyond. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a roll of the cosmic dice with everything riding on the outcome. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence, the kind that makes your ears ring and your heart beat a little too fast. Then slowly, the sounds of chaos began to fade, replaced by a quieter, more subdued hum. "It's working," Roderick said, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and relief. "It's actually working." Inara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her shoulders sagging with the release of tension. "Well, I'll be damned. Maybe the universe does owe us a favor after all." The group exchanged weary, triumphant grins, their faces alight with the kind of hope that had been absent for far too long. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was the closest they'd come in a long time. As they made their way back to the city, the air felt different, lighter somehow. They had taken a step towards reclaiming their home, and though the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, they walked it with a renewed sense of purpose. Inara and Roderick exchanged a glance, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had faced the darkness and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least stronger for it. And in a world gone mad, that was more than enough. Dr. Roderick Tarsis stood at the entrance of the Black Hole Energy Facility, a grim smile twitching at the corners of his mouth. The facility, a hulking behemoth of twisted metal and perilous ambition, was ground zero for the mess they found themselves in. It was also their last hope for salvation. How poetic. "Inara, you ready for this?" Roderick asked, adjusting his helmet lights for what felt like the 100th time. "Or should we just turn around and let the moon swallow us whole?" Inara Vex, the queen of reluctant optimism, snorted. "If I wanted to die, I'd at least choose somewhere with a view. This place is a hellhole, literally." Their small team, a motley crew of desperate survivors and reluctant heroes, shuffled behind them. Specs, perpetually adjusting his taped-together glasses, was muttering something about statistical improbabilities, while Dr. Karev, the nanobot whisperer, was already lost in his own world, mumbling equations and making love to his data pad. "All right, folks," Roderick said, turning to face the ragtag assembly. "Here's the deal. We get in, deploy the nanobots, and pray to whichever gods we've been ignoring that they work their magic." Inara grinned, cracking her knuckles. "And if they don't, then we can add pioneer explorers of lunar disaster to our resumes," Roderick replied with a shrug. "Assuming any of us live long enough to update them." With that cheerful thought, they breached the facility's entrance, the door hissing open to reveal a dimly lit corridor. The air was thick with the scent of burnt circuits and desperation, a sensory reminder of just how dire their situation had become. "Smells like someone's been overcooking their tech," Inara remarked, wrinkling her nose. "Is that ozone or just the stench of a bad idea?" Roderick led the way, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls like ghosts at a party no one wanted to attend. "Probably both. Let's hope it's not our last bad idea of the day." The path through the facility was a maze of redundant security measures and malfunctioning systems. They moved with a sense of urgency, the weight of the city's fate pressing down on their shoulders like an overenthusiastic Grim Reaper. A sudden noise made them all freeze, hearts pounding in unison. The sound of shuffling feet was unmistakable, even through the thick doors of the facility's control room. "Looks like we've got company," Inara whispered, her voice low and tense. "Great," Roderick muttered. Because what we really needed was more excitement. Their strategy was simple: avoid confrontation if possible, but be ready to fight if it came down to it. The infected were relentless, but they weren't particularly bright. If luck was on their side, they might just sneak past without incident. Of course, luck was a fickle companion, and today it seemed particularly uninterested in their plight. Specs, Roderick whispered, how's your luck with disabling ancient security systems? Specs adjusted his glasses, the tape straining under the pressure. Let's just say I'm on a first-name basis with disappointment. Perfect, Inara said, drawing her weapon. Just what we needed, a pessimist with a penchant for failure. The infected were close now, the sound of their mindless shuffling, a constant reminder of the stakes they faced. Roderick motioned for the team to spread out, taking positions that maximized their limited cover. Doctor. Karev, Roderick said softly, you think you can get those nanobots working once we reach the mainframe? Karev, looking more like a mad scientist with each passing moment, nodded. Just keep the zombies off my back and we'll be fine. Zombies now, is it? Inara quipped. Great, someone should start writing a survival guide. The moment came to a head as the infected stumbled into view, their eyes vacant and hungry. Roderick, heart pounding, gave the signal. The team sprang into action. The ensuing chaos was a blur of movement and noise. Inara was a whirlwind, her every move calculated and precise, dispatching the infected with a grim determination that bordered on artistry. Roderick stayed close to Karev, guarding the scientist as he worked to access the mainframe. Specs, take the left, Roderick shouted over the cacophony, his voice barely audible over the growls of the infected. Already there, Specs replied, his slender frame darting through the shadows like a wiry ghost. Meanwhile, Karev was a flurry of frantic motion, his fingers dancing over the controls with a speed that defied his age. The mainframe's ancient systems groaned under his ministrations, but slowly, grudgingly they came to life. Got it, Karev shouted triumphantly. Nanobots ready to deploy. About bloody time, Inara muttered, knocking another infected to the ground with a well-placed kick. With a final tap, Karev unleashed the nanobots. The tiny machines, nearly invisible to the naked eye, spread out into the facility like a silent, invisible swarm of salvation. For a tense moment, there was nothing but the continued struggle against the infected, the air thick with noise and chaos. Then in a heartbeat, everything changed. The infected froze, their movements halting as the nanobots began their work, targeting the viral mutations with pinpoint precision. It was like watching a miracle unfold in real time, a brutal, grimy miracle, but a miracle nonetheless. As the infected began to collapse, their bodies finally giving in to the exhaustion of their condition, a hush fell over the facility. The team stood in a ragged circle, each member breathing heavily, hearts pounding in collective relief. Is it over? Specs asked, voice trembling slightly. Looks like it, Roderick replied, his voice a mixture of disbelief and weary satisfaction. The nanobots did their job. Inara, her face flushed from exertion, let out a breathless laugh. Well, I'll be damned, we might just survive this after all, Doctor. Karev, despite looking like he'd just run a marathon of the mind, managed a grim smile. Never doubted it for a second. Sure, Inara teased. You're a regular Nostradamus. Next, you'll tell us the lotto numbers. With the immediate threat neutralized, they turned their attention to the facility's systems. Restoring power was their next priority, a task that fell squarely on Roderick's shoulders as the resident expert on all things that beeped and booped. All right, he said, rolling up his sleeves. Let's see if we can get this city back online. The control room was a mess of outdated technology and jury-rigged solutions, a testament to humanity's refusal to let a little thing like obsolescence get in the way of progress. Roderick dove into the tangle of wires and consoles, adjusting settings and rerouting power with a practiced hand. Specs, he called, help me with this. We need to balance the energy output or the whole system will fry. Specs joined him, their combined efforts a symphony of frantic adjustments and muttered curses. Outside, the facility hummed with latent power, the black holes that fueled Casimir beginning to stir once more. As they worked, Inara and Karev kept watch, their eyes scanning the surrounding corridors for any sign of trouble. The infected might have been neutralized, but this was a world where nothing stayed dormant for long. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of tinkering, the facility's systems roared to life. The lights blazed with renewed vigor, the hum of power a reassuring presence that filled the air. We did it, Specs said, his voice tinged with awe. The city's back online. Roderick leaned back, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Let's just hope it holds. As the team regrouped, the weight of their actions began to sink in. They had faced impossible odds, danced with death, and somehow come out the other side. It wasn't a victory parade, more like a victory shuffle, but it was enough. Inara, ever the cynic, was the first to break the silence. You know, if we keep this up, they might start calling us heroes. Roderick chuckled, shaking his head. Heroes, huh? I'd settle for a decent meal and a good night's sleep. Karev, standing a little straighter now that the crisis was past, nodded. Sleep sounds good. Never thought I'd miss dreaming about mundane things. Specs, adjusting his glasses once more, smiled. Let's just hope our dreams don't involve any more apocalypse scenarios. With a renewed sense of purpose, they made their way back to the city, their footsteps a steady march of determination. The lunar landscape, barren and desolate, seemed almost welcoming now, a familiar challenge rather than a deadly adversary. Casimir greeted them with flickering lights and the distant sounds of life resuming its pace. The city, bruised but not broken, stood as a testament to humanity's resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times there was always a glimmer of hope. As they walked, Roderick and Inara fell into step beside one another, their expressions a mix of weariness and satisfaction. "You think we'll ever get used to this?" Inara asked, her voice soft, almost contemplative. Roderick glanced at her, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Probably not, but that's what keeps it interesting, right?" "Yes," Inara agreed. "Interesting, that's one way to put it." Behind them, the facility loomed in the distance, a silent guardian watching over the city it had both endangered and ultimately helped to save. And so they walked on into whatever the future held, knowing that no matter how grim the world might seem, they had the strength to face it head-on, with a little humor, a lot of grit, and the unwavering belief that somehow, someway, they'd find a way forward. As the dust settled and the facility loomed behind them like a grumpy old man scowling from his porch, the lunar city of Casimir flickered back to life. It wasn't a full resurrection, more like a coffin dodger deciding to give life one more go. The city lights came on in a wavering dance that suggested they were powered by the collective willpower of everyone who hadn't yet given up. Roderick and Inara trudged through the lunar dust, which clung to their boots like that one party guest who doesn't know when to leave. The silence between them was the comfortable kind, the kind you get after narrowly avoiding a messy end and deciding maybe life wasn't so bad if you were alive to live it. "Well," Inara said, breaking the quiet, "it wasn't the worst day," Roderick snorted. "By our standards, it was practically a vacation." Inara's eyes roamed over the cityscape, her expression a blend of cynicism and reluctant admiration. "You know, considering the whole zombie virus black hole power outage thing, it's a miracle anything works at all." "Humans," Roderick replied, a hint of grim pride in his voice. "If there's one thing we're good at, it's stumbling through the apocalypse and coming out slightly more damaged but still kicking." They walked past the skeletal remains of vehicles that had run out of juice during the blackout, their owners having either fled or been turned into mindless shufflers looking for their next meal. Unpleasant business, all of it, but then again, survival wasn't supposed to be pretty. Specs joined them, adjusting his glasses with the familiar whine of tape against plastic. "I've said it before, and I'll say it again, this city's infrastructure is a death trap." "Yeah, but it's our death trap," Inara said, managing a smile despite her exhaustion. "Besides, where else are we gonna go?" "Casimir real estate isn't exactly a booming market." "True," Specs admitted, glancing around as if expecting a realtor to pop out from behind a pile of rubble with a brochure. "But you'd think the city council would at least spring for some kind of insurance plan," Roderick sighed. "We're all on the same plan, hope nothing else goes wrong until it inevitably does." As they approached the city's center, a crowd had begun to gather, faces etched with the kind of weariness that comes from living on the edge of disaster. Survivors milled about, exchanging stories that were equal parts harrowing and banal. A broken arm here, a lost family pet there. Humanity's little tragedies never stopped, even on the moon. Dr. Karov was already at work, engaging in animated discussions with a group of technicians as he gestured towards a map of the city's power grid. Every few seconds his wild hair would bounce, as if it had a mind of its own orchestrating some unseen symphony of madness. "Karov's in his element," Inara noted. "He just needs a lab coat and a crazy laugh, and he's the complete package." "Careful," Roderick chuckled. He might take that as encouragement. As they rejoined the group, Roderick turned his attention to an area where engineers were attempting to coax the city's systems back to full operation. It was like trying to convince a cat to take a bath, possible, but it was going to involve a lot of hissing and scratching. "All right, folks," Roderick said, clapping his hands to gather everyone's attention. "We've got our work cut out for us. Specs, see if you can stabilize the power flow. Inara, can you help organize the relief supplies?" "Roger that," Inara replied with a mock salute. "Saving the city one box of beans at a time." Specs nodded, pushing up his glasses as the tape threatened to give up entirely. "You know, I always wanted to be a hero. I figured it'd involve capes and less manual labor." "You and me both," Roderick agreed. "Turns out heroism is mostly paperwork and trying not to die." The team dispersed, each member taking on a piece of the enormous puzzle that was putting Casimir back together. It was a tangled mess of logistics and hope, but it was better than nothing. As the hours dragged into a blur of activity, Roderick found himself standing at the edge of the city's central plaza. The hustle and bustle of organized chaos surrounded him, and despite everything, there was a strange beauty to it all. Humans were like cockroaches, give them a crack and they'd squeeze through, finding ways to survive just about anything. Inara joined him, her hands on her hips as she surveyed the scene. What a mess, she said, though her tone was almost affectionate. Yeah, but it's our mess, Roderick replied. And we're stubborn enough to stick with it, you know, Inara said, her voice contemplative. All this has got me thinking. Maybe we ought to be better prepared next time. I'm not saying we go full-on doomsday preppers, but maybe a little less flying by the seat of our pants. Roderick nodded. I like pants flying as much as the next guy, but you're right. We should put together some contingency plans, stockpile resources. Maybe even train the civilians in basic survival tactics. Inara raised an eyebrow. Like how to use a can opener without slicing open an artery. Exactly, Roderick grinned. Start small, work our way up. The idea of preparing for future disasters was both sobering and heartening. If nothing else, it was a reminder that they were still here, still fighting, and that they could make a difference. Hey, Specs called out, rejoining them with a triumphant expression. The power's stabilized. We're not at full capacity yet, but at least the lights won't flicker like a horror movie set. Good work, Roderick said, clapping him on the shoulder. See, who needs capes when you've got brains and duct tape? Specs chuckled. I guess if we save the city, I can live without the superhero spandex. As they stood there, basking in the momentary victory, Roderick felt a sense of camaraderie that was rare in times like these. They were a ragtag bunch, held together by necessity and shared experience, but there was no one else he'd want by his side when the universe decided to throw another curveball. All right, Roderick said, his tone shifting to one of resolve. Let's keep the momentum going. There's still a lot to do. The team dispersed once more, each member focused on their task, but the glimmers of hope were undeniable. Casimir would endure. It wasn't perfect, hell, it wasn't even close, but it was home, and they were damn well going to protect it. Inara watched the activity with a thoughtful expression. You know, Roderick, despite everything, I think we're going to be okay. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but one day. Roderick turned to her, a sardonic smile playing across his lips. Yeah, we'll be okay. And when we're not, at least we'll have the satisfaction of knowing we went down fighting. What a comforting thought, Inara said, smirking. Makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Roderick laughed, the sound echoing through the plaza. Come on, then. Let's get back to work. The universe isn't going to wait for us to catch our breath. With renewed determination, they plunged back into the fray, their steps steady and sure as they navigated the organized chaos of a city on the mend. They were survivors, each scar and bruise a testament to their tenacity. And no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together, with a grin and a sarcastic quip at the ready. As the day wore on, the sun dipped below the lunar horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the landscape like fingers of doubt. But even in the gathering darkness, the city of Casimir shone brightly, a beacon of resilience in a world that seemed determined to test the limits of human endurance. In the end, it wasn't perfection they sought, but the ability to endure, to adapt, and to find humor in the midst of chaos. Because in a universe that was as unpredictable as it was unforgiving, sometimes the best you could do was laugh in its face and keep moving forward. And so they did, each step a defiance, each breath a declaration. We are still here, and we will not be broken. After all, humanity had never been known for its grace, but when it came to getting back up after a fall, there were none better.